context. So I was at the International Astronautical Congress down at the Metro Toronto Convention Center this week. And that's composed of several tracks devoted to different aspects. And so you can go into one track and it's all about rocket propulsion. You can go to another track about Mars exploration and so on. And there's actually one track that's about SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Now, my talk is not a global overview about SETI because, of course, I prepared it for that audience, and they know all about that. In fact, they know more about it than I did because I'm looking out at the audience and here are these guys. They're just legends in the field, and so that I couldn't tell this guy anything. So I had to stick to my corner, my observations. So the first thing I'll say about this is these are not the guys that are looking for UFOs in grainy old photographs. Right? These guys have radio telescopes and they're searching for correlated signals from outer space. So, gee, if you look at a star and you're seeing this blip, 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 and you're getting prime numbers or something like that, it might be artificial origin. That would be kind of interesting. There's actually somebody out there who's intelligent. And intelligent being defined as can build a radio transmitter, and is willing to send prime numbers or something like that. And so that's most of what's being done is that big telescopes searching a large spread of bandwidth in the sky and listening. And that's think of that's the scientific part of SETI. There's this other part that goes. I call it active SETI. It's also sometimes called METI. It's messages. Okay, and the observation is, all the equipment we have listening could not detect anything being radiated from Earth, from anywhere out there, right? So if everybody's listening and nobody's talking, nobody hears anything and can conclude there's nobody out there, right? But it could be that every planet has a whole civilization on it, and we're all sitting there not doing anything. And so the question is, maybe we ought to send a message. Well, there's problems with that. Gee, what if we do send a message and then what happens, right? So there are a couple of models, and one model is, gee, if we send a message, somebody replies, or then they're in much older civilizations, so they haven't destroyed themselves, so they know how to live in harmony, and so they would live in harmony with us. That's one philosophy. There's no data, of course, in support of that, because there's no evidence, haven't received anything. There's another piece of data that says go back. This is Henry Hudson exploring the river by his name on his way to Toronto, what would become Toronto. And so there's other evidence from human history. Oh, look, in human history, when cultures with radically dissimilar technologies have met, this has not always worked well for those with the less advanced technology. Okay. And so there's this one are peaceful and some are less peaceful, but in fact, but there's actually nothing to support this that the aliens are like this either. But there are some loud, relatively learned voices that are saying we ought to worry about this, and we ought to worry about this because, well, we're risking a lot. So the first thing is, so I'm going to talk about what I call the betrayal of location concern. If you're worried about somebody coming and attacking you, and all of our images come from entertainment, right? So this is the War of the Worlds, or Independence Day, or Alien versus Predator, whatever it is, right? Or it might be accidental. It might be the Andromeda strain or something else. Yeah. So, gee, there's what if, and okay. So frame the problem. Well, the risk is great. Gee, we're risking literally everything. Say, what if we'd like to talk but not meet? Okay, how do we do that? Can we have an anonymizer or something like that? And then do we even have a choice? This is actually another sort of this other meta question, and it says, you know what? We've been on Earth, we've been FM transmitters and radars, and the waves have been going out for 60 years, and there's really nothing we can do about it. In fact, they're pretty weak. But we all know that weak doesn't matter. All it means is you need a bigger antenna on the other end to find it. So maybe they have a big antenna. Well, let me talk about betrayal of location concern. So how do we make a message that doesn't divulge where we are? Okay. So the first thing was, so we have put messages out there. This is the Arecibo message, the very first one. A rectangular array, product of two prime numbers, so there are only limited ways that the recipient could potentially put it back together again, and then they would see something interesting. And one of the things interesting to see is Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Look at that, this one's out of line. It even has Pluto on it, it shows you where we are in this one. So, yeah, okay, we are here. Or the Voyager record said distances to pulsars. And anybody looks at that and they'll look at these pulsars and say, okay, I know where you are. So, so if you don't want to betray your location, maybe you just censor the message. Okay, well that's pretty straightforward and simple. Could have done that without a talk. But what if they're as clever as we are, and they have radio telescopes, and they're going to get this message, and they're curious. What would we do if we got the message? The first question we ask is, what are they saying? And the second question we could ask is, where are they? How do you find out where they are? Well, there's this thing called angular resolution. Right? So you get a signal, and it's blipping out there. There's a dot, and you know what? There they are. Okay, it doesn't matter that we didn't put our location in it. They're just look at the signal. Where is it coming from? Well, it's actually not that simple because this thing called angular resolution. Angular resolution depends on the frequency you're transmitting and the diameter of your receiver. So if you have an interferometer and you have really long baseline, then you can find with great accuracy where the signal is coming from. If you have a really low frequency, it's hard to you can't align it. So how do we make sure that they can't find us? How do we make this picture blurry enough they can't find us? Well, pick a frequency. The first thing we do is we can assume that they have planetary scale interferometers, because we do. And let's just pick 1 arc second, and as how much angular resolution we're willing to give them. And then from that, we can compute, we ought to be transmitting at about a meter. That's the frequency. It's interesting to note that because, in fact, where we've been listening has been around, about 21 centimeters, about 20 centimeters. So we've been listening at a frequency that we assume would be a good one because the galaxy is relatively transparent at that frequency. And so signals travel a long way. But if you're concerned about not betraying your location, two things. One is you like to pick a frequency that hides where you are, poor angular resolution, and you don't want to go on forever. You don't want to be broadcasting to everybody. You want to have a conversation with one person. So this is a better number. So that was kind of the first thing. Yeah, pick a frequency. And so here's the angular resolution. The other thing, you have to pick a target. And so here's your target. Here's us. And they're looking back at us, and they're going to see some background star. And maybe that's where a message comes from. Or maybe there's a lot of background stars, and they really have no idea which one it came from. Okay? So blur it out and have a lot of potential options. If they're going to come and invade, they got 100 choices, and maybe they're not going to be. They may not going to find us. So transmit the longer wavelength. I said 1 meter. Well, what if we were really kind of paranoid? What if 1 arc second is not the right number? Maybe 1 arc minute, or maybe we are going to assume they're going to have solar system scale interferometers, which we could have soon. Then maybe we ought to be putting our signals out at 10-kilometer wavelengths. And the other possibility I mentioned is limit parallax opportunity. So limit when we broadcast, because if we broadcast in spring and autumn, there's a baseline that they could help. That would help them derive the location. The second question is Doppler. So we're sending our signals, and it's we're sending it from the surface of our planet. Our planet's moving. And that's easily seen in the signal. I mean, it's really small, but it's really easy to see. It's how we know there are planets around other stars. Okay, so they could do that too. Okay, so the answer is precompensate. Take it out. We know how our planet's moving. whether relative to the target star or the galactic center, and we can just dial it right out. We have to be very careful, and it's continual adjustment as Earth moves to take out that Doppler shift. We can do it, not a problem. Attenuation dispersion. Okay, as these signals propagate through the galaxy, they disperse a little bit, and they go through clouds that will absorb some of the energy. Well, we could pre-disperse the signal. Instead of spending a nice pulse on an exact frequency, blur it out a little bit. It'll appear to have come from farther away. So we can make the signal appear to have come from some background star. Have you noticed we just crossed the line? Up to then, I was talking about obscuring information, and now I'm deceiving. Okay? Okay, I can make it appear to have come from somewhere else. Yeah, we can look back at dust clouds and gas clouds in the galaxy, and dial those into our transmission. Doppler. Get out the Kepler data. Look at one of those background stars, find a good planet on the background star, and dial in their Doppler and dial ours out. No problem. So the guys at the target can look back and say, oh yeah, it must have come from over there. And guess what? Look at the attenuation. Looks like it's coming from there anyway. Clever. Oh, and while we're at it, let's put something in the message content that says, yeah, that's where we come from. So you look down here and say, well, where are we, right? We come from this other planet. In fact, we put together a planetary system from our Kepler data that looks like that one, and dial in that information. Okay. So we can be pretty clever about the whole thing. While we're at it, so for those of you who are really concerned about putting in deceptive information, we can put in little things like this. All right. So this is pi that's correct only to 4 decimal places, but and a recipient, if we received a message like this, look at this, say, look, either they're totally stupid, right? They got lousy proofreaders, they've invented a different kind of science than we have, or they're sending us a puzzle. Maybe they're sending us a puzzle. So let me talk about the downside of this, call it signal conditioning. Actually talk about upside and downsides. First of all, removing the Doppler shift, something like that, could be considered helpful. Right? Gee, I mean, it's what we do today with spacecraft. When the spacecraft are having trouble receiving it, we actually pre-distort to remove Doppler shifts, not only from our transmitter, but also from the spacecraft out there. It just makes the receiver simpler. So that could be considered very helpful. It also could be considered frightening, right? If we received a message from an alien it knew exactly what time of day it was at our receiver, it might be a little spooky. It just dialed in for that. Yeah, it's easy to receive, but they know a lot about us. We'd be a little nervous. So maybe that would make them a little nervous. It could be considered a puzzle, like I said, and maybe the answer would be we send that out and wait for a response that has pi corrected. And maybe, no, you're not on the 4th planet, you're on the 3rd one, we can see you. That might be a nice thing to know. Actually, deception might be considered unfriendly or aggressive, and actually might precipitate the behavior that we're concerned about in the first place. We don't know. Nobody knows. I'm not an exopsychologist. I don't know what the answer is. Nobody knows what the answer is. Okay? But if your concern was betrayal of location, we can go back and consider some of these techniques, or consider the bundle of techniques. And from a recipient's point of view, if the preponderance of evidence leads to this signal coming from somewhere else, it would probably answer there. They might answer in a way that we've never seen the answer because they're not talking to us. So there are implications here for our passive SETI, our normal SETI thing, our listening program. Well, why is that? Maybe ET doesn't trust us and is doing all this stuff. Right? Maybe the reason we haven't detected a message is we're just looking at the wrong wavelength. We need to be looking at a wavelength that has a very poor angular resolution because they don't trust us to know where they are. Or maybe we're just not properly aligned. And nobody's going to send a message because there aren't enough background stars to make a credible alternative. Long wavelengths get absorbed in the interstellar medium, same sort of thing. We should expect a very limited message duration of time. We should be considering falsified data. If we ever get one of these messages, right? The Doppler data, we're going to be very clever. We're going to look at Doppler. Look at this. Yeah, their planet has a 20-hour rotation period. It's be all right. And even if they sent a message that says, "Look, I'm here. Look at all the distance of these pulsars. Look, I'm at Alpha Centauri." And so, one of the philosophies in SETI is, "Oh, gee, maybe we'll get the Encyclopedia Galactica and they'll tell us all this cool stuff." If they did, would we trust it? Right? Or would this be, finally we deciphered the message. It says there are 10 million ulterior dollars in a bank in Alpha Centauri. If you just send us your location, we'll email it to you. It just casts a whole set of doubts. The things that we would do, we only have statistics of one, and we make a lot of assumptions from those statistics. But could we trust the data? That's that. So we got a discussion on that.